41-year-old Terry Jackson has been on the run from authorities since February.
We cannot stand for violence. We cannot.
A devoted mother of 6, brutally murdered, a fugitive on the run for months, and a community demanding justice. The tragic case of Brittany Booker is one that shook the city of Racine, Wisconsin, and sparked a nationwide conversation about domestic violence and the justice system. How did a young woman try and protect a friend become the target of a ruthless killer? And why was a murderer, who had already attacked her once, allowed to walk free? Tonight, we take a deep dive into the shocking case of Brittany Booker, unraveling the events that led to her tragic death and the desperate manhunt that followed. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Crime Watch Reports for more in-depth crime stories that demand to be told. Now, let's get into the case, asterisk. Who was Brittany Booker? Brittany Booker was a 30-year-old mother of 6 from Racine, Wisconsin. She was known for her warm smile, loving personality, and dedication to her children. Friends and family describe her as hardworking and compassionate, always willing to lend a helping hand. But on April 24th, 2022, her life was cut short in a brutal act of violence, one that would shock the entire community and spark a desperate manhunt for her killer. Born and raised in Racine, Brittany was deeply connected to her community. She balanced the responsibilities of being a devoted mother, while also working tirelessly to provide for her family. She was a woman of strength and perseverance, someone who never hesitated to support those in need. Friends recall her as a loving, selfless individual who put others before herself. But behind her kindness and resilience, Brittany faced an unseen threat, one that would ultimately lead to a devastating tragedy. Brittany's story is not just about who she was, but also about the circumstances that led to her untimely death. As a mother, she worked hard to create a stable and loving home for her children. As a friend, she was fiercely loyal, never turning away from those who needed her. But one decision to help a friend in need would place her directly in the path of danger. Her final months were overshadowed by fear. She had unknowingly become a target, and despite her attempts to move forward, the danger never truly went away. The man responsible for her death had already shown his violent tendencies, and Brittany found herself trapped in a nightmare that she could not escape. The tragic end of Brittany Booker's life left a deep impact on those who knew and loved her. The community of Racine, shaken by the brutality of the crime, mourned the loss of a woman who had so much more life to live. Her 6 children were left without a mother, her family without a daughter, and her friends without a source of light and kindness. As her story unfolds, the question remains, how did this happen? And could it have been prevented? The tragic chain of events that led to Brittany Booker's murder began months before that fateful day. It all started in February 2022, when her friend found herself trapped in an abusive relationship with a man named Terry Jackson. A violent and unpredictable individual, Jackson had a history of domestic violence, and when Brittany stepped in to help her friend escape, she unknowingly became his next target. The situation escalated quickly. Jackson, enraged by Brittany's involvement, decided to send a brutal message. One night, he launched a vicious attack on both women, wielding a hammer as a weapon. The injuries were severe. Both Brittany and her friend suffered serious wounds, barely escaping with their lives. The attack sent shockwaves through their community, and authorities wasted no time in arresting Jackson. But what happened next would prove to be a devastating failure in the justice system. Despite the severity of his crime, Jackson was released on bail. It was a decision that would have deadly consequences. Rather than face justice, he vanished. Authorities declared him a fugitive, and a manhunt was launched, but weeks passed with no sign of him. His disappearance sent fear rippling through Brittany's life. Every day became a struggle between maintaining normalcy and grappling with the anxiety that he could return at any moment. As law enforcement searched, Brittany tried to move on with her life. She returned to her job, cared for her children, and attempted to regain a sense of normalcy. But deep down, she knew the danger wasn't over. Friends later recalled that Brittany often spoke of her fear that Jackson would come back. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, dreading the possibility that he was lurking nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike. She strengthened her resolve, hoping that the law would catch him before it was too late. But Brittany was not just a victim. She was a mother, a daughter, and a friend. She did not let fear stop her from living, though she remained cautious. Her resilience was evident in how she carried herself. But behind closed doors, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier each day. The fear was not unfounded, and with each passing moment, Jackson's desire for revenge festered. And she was right to be afraid. Jackson had no intention of letting her escape his wrath. As the days turned into weeks, his obsession with Brittany only grew. He remained in hiding, but he was watching, waiting. He had unfinished business. Then, in the early hours of April 24th, 2022, the nightmare finally came to life. The shadows that haunted Brittany's every step materialized into a real and present danger. She had fought to reclaim her life, but the path she tried to escape was about to catch up with her in the most violent way possible. A violent predator was on the loose, and Brittany Booker was in his sights. On April 24th, 2022, the worst fears of Brittany Booker's loved ones became a reality. That morning, she was reported missing. Hours later, authorities discovered her lifeless body inside her vehicle near 13th and Villa Street in Racine, Wisconsin. The young mother of 6 had been brutally murdered. Law enforcement officials wasted no time in identifying the prime suspect, Terry Jackson. Jackson, who had been on the run for months after attacking Brittany and her friend with a hammer, had finally resurfaced. But this time, he made sure Brittany would never escape again. According to police reports, Jackson had ambushed Brittany outside her home in the early hours of the morning, under cover of darkness. He forced her into her own vehicle and drove off. The details of what transpired inside that car remained chilling, but one thing was clear: Brittany never had a chance. Her injuries indicated a violent struggle. She fought for her life, but Jackson was relentless. By the time authorities found her, it was too late. The crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving friends and family devastated. A woman who had survived a brutal assault just months earlier was now gone, taken by the very man she had feared the most. News of Brittany's murder spread rapidly, igniting outrage and grief across Racine. Many questioned how a known fugitive, one who had already demonstrated his capacity for extreme violence, was able to remain free long enough to kill again. The justice system had failed her. Despite clear warning signs and previous charges, Jackson had managed to evade authorities for months, and Brittany paid the ultimate price. Law enforcement agencies immediately intensified the manhunt for Jackson. Local police, the U.S. Marshals, and other federal authorities joined forces, vowing to bring him to justice. Public pressure mounted as Brittany's murder became the focus of a nationwide outcry. Community members, activists, and even strangers demanded accountability. People wanted answers, and most of all, they wanted Jackson caught before he could hurt anyone else. But Jackson was elusive. He had spent months in hiding and knew how to evade capture. With every passing hour, the fear that he might escape justice once again grew stronger. Authorities assured the public that they would not stop until he was found. But the lingering question remained: how long would it take? As the investigation deepened, disturbing details emerged about Jackson's past, his history of violence, his ability to manipulate the system, and his utter disregard for human life painted the picture of a dangerous predator. For Brittany's family, there was no comfort, only the painful reality that their daughter, their mother, their friend was gone. A beloved woman had been taken too soon. And now, the entire country was watching, waiting for justice to be served. For months, Terry Jackson remained a ghost, eluding law enforcement and leaving an entire community on edge. Fear gripped Racine as the man responsible for Brittany Booker's brutal murder remained at large. Residents were afraid. Many wondered, if he could kill once, could he do it again? Authorities ramped up their search efforts. The Racine Police Department, working alongside state and federal agencies, expanded their manhunt. But Jackson was nowhere to be found. His ability to disappear only intensified frustrations, with Brittany's family and community demanding answers. How had he managed to slip through the cracks for so long? And why wasn't he behind bars in the first place? As the search stretched into weeks and then months, the U.S. Marshals joined the case. Jackson was now on the run with national attention focused on his capture. Investigators followed every possible lead, interviewing known associates, tracking movements, and issuing public warnings. Tips flooded in, but Jackson remained elusive. The pressure was mounting. Law enforcement released updated photos of Jackson and urged the public to remain vigilant. Brittany's family made emotional pleas, hoping someone would come forward with the information needed to end this nightmare. The search spanned multiple states, with authorities believing Jackson had fled Wisconsin altogether. Finally, in July 2022, after an intense 3-month pursuit, the manhunt came to an end. Terry Jackson was located and arrested in Chicago. He was taken into custody without incident. For Brittany's family, the moment was bittersweet. Justice was finally within reach, but it could never bring her back. News of his capture spread quickly. The community that had lived in fear for months could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But while Jackson's arrest answered one question, it raised another. How had he been allowed to evade justice for so long? As he awaited trial, discussions about systemic failures in the justice system reignited. Many questioned why Jackson had been granted bail after his violent attack on Brittany and her friend. Why was a man with a history of abuse and aggression free to walk the streets? These were the painful questions that Brittany's family and supporters demanded answers to. For now, one thing was certain. Terry Jackson would finally face justice. But for those who had lost Brittany, the fight was far from over. They would continue to push for accountability, ensuring that no other family would have to endure the same devastating loss. Terry Jackson's arrest was only the beginning of a long legal battle. He faced multiple charges, including first-degree intentional homicide, kidnapping, and other felonies tied to his violent history. Prosecutors made it clear they were seeking the maximum sentence, ensuring that Jackson would never harm another person again. As the case moved to the legal system, Brittany Booker's family remained at the forefront, demanding justice for the woman whose life was stolen too soon. They attended court hearings, spoke with the media, and ensured that Brittany's voice was never silenced. Their grief was unimaginable, but their determination was unshaken. The trial garnered widespread attention. Domestic violence advocates and legal experts weighed in, using Brittany's case as a stark reminder of the dangers of repeat offenders. Many questioned why Jackson had been released after his initial attack. If stronger protective measures had been in place, could Brittany have been saved? Public outrage grew. Protests and vigils were held in Brittany's honor, with supporters calling for stricter laws against domestic abusers. Social media campaigns spread awareness, urging lawmakers to strengthen protection for victims. Brittany's story became a rallying cry, a painful example of a system that had failed to act before it was too late. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors laid out the devastating details of Brittany's final moments. Witnesses recounted the fears she lived with, knowing Jackson was out there, waiting. For Brittany's loved ones, every testimony was a painful reminder of what they had lost. But through it all, they remained steadfast, determined to see justice served. Months of legal proceedings led to a verdict. The jury found Terry Jackson guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Brittany's family, the ruling brought some measure closure, but no sentence could undo the pain of losing her. Brittany Booker's legacy did not end with the trial. Her story became a force for change, prompting conversations about domestic violence laws, victim protection, and the urgent need for reform. Across the country, her name became synonymous with resilience, justice, and the fight to protect those in danger. Her family, though forever heartbroken, vowed to continue Brittany's fight. They turned their grief into advocacy, ensuring that her story would not be forgotten. Because for them, and for so many others, Brittany Booker was more than a victim. She was a symbol of strength, love, and the desperate need for change. Brittany Booker was a devoted mother, a caring friend, and a woman who stood up for others. Her story is one of both tragedy and resilience. As we remember her, we must also ask ourselves, how can we prevent tragedies like this from happening again? What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story impactful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Crime Watch Reports for more true crime investigations. Thank you for watching and stay safe.